So we'll discuss a little bit about the mitzvah of Simcha on Sukkot. And specifically we'll get to Hallel as well, why we say Hallel during the Yontiv of Sukkot. But just to go back a step, there's a mitzvah of Simcha, well, actually all year round. Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. You have a general rule in Judaism, one is supposed to serve God b'simcha. And that's true all the time. However, on Yontif, in addition to the generic Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, we have some more specific rules how to guide us into Simcha. As always, Simcha is a feeling, and when the Torah, the Chachamim made rules, it's rules to try to help us feel the Simcha. Conversely, just like we have mourning was also Ein Aninis Elo Balev, but we have different Nihugei Avelos, sitting on the ground, closing up, blocking the mirrors, doing different things. It's all try to get us to that feeling. You know, sometimes they work better than others, but that's a separate discussion. But in terms of they set up the system and try to enhance Simcha, or in case of mourning, the reverse. But there's a general mitzvah Simcha all the time, and the Hasidim are very big on that. But that's something everyone agrees with. And specifically on Yontiv, in addition to a good idea of serving a God b'simcha, there's a mitzvah min ha-Torah. The Torah tells us, v'samachta b'chagecha, among other things, there's a mitzvah min ha-Torah of serving God b'simcha on Yontiv, perhaps all week long, all year round as well, but more specifically, from a halachic point of view, on Yontiv. And in fact, even though it's true to all the Shalosh Regalim, it's true on Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuos, the concept of Simcha. However, there's even a more inherent mitzvah of Simcha on Sukkot itself. It says it more times by Sukkot. As we'll see, Simchas Torah is a time we have after Sukkot, Shemini Atzeres, Simchas Torah. We see there's more of an Indian of Simcha. The Gemara talks about Simchas Beis HaShoeva, the one who hasn't gone to the Beis HaMikdash and saw all the magic tricks with the rabbis and the fires, all that, doesn't know what Simcha is. So there's a general, the mitzvah of Simcha applies to all Yom Tovim. And in fact, that's why we cannot have Avelos on Yontiv. We can't have Avelos, mourning, and Simcha cannot coincide. As we see, that's not true on Shabbos. Every Shiva has the Shabbos in it, so it's not a contradiction. We definitely minimize the mourning on Shabbos. We don't have any public mourning on Shabbos, but there is private mourning. Hence the discussion, different minhagim, whether when a person is in mourning, Avelos, do they go to the Kiddush after Shul? Do they sit in Shalosh Shidduch? Or, you could pick the example. And the issue being is, if by doing something you ordinarily do, by not doing it, is that a form, if someone goes to Kiddush after Shul every Shabbos, so by not going, is that a form of a public mourning? Because everyone knows why you're not going, etc. Again, so different minhagim, different practices depending on the scenario. One would not have an obligation to go, but this is part of the discussion. So on Shabbos, you can have Avelos, but clearly it's not a time of open mourning. Yontiv, you can't even have private mourning. Albeit it is a machlokas harishonim, we paskin, there is not even private mourning. Yontiv and Avelos cannot coexist. Hence, if someone passed away before Yontiv, so then Yontiv uproots the Shiva, uproots the whole mourning process. And if Rahman al-Assalam, like it happens, someone dies over Yontiv, so of course we do the kfura, the burial we do today on Chol Hamoed, but the Shiva doesn't begin until after Yontif. In fact, back in the day, we never had a kfura on Shabbos. That you never have. But strictly speaking, Me'ikar Din HaGemara, we used to have burial on Yontif. The Gemara says Yontif Rishon, a Yontif Rishon, you could bury someone through Gayim. And Yontif Sheni, Afil Al Yidei Yisrael, even by Jews. In fact, that is the custom among some. It might be the Yekis in Washington Heights, I believe, the German community, among certain Hasidim that they do burial even on Yontif Sheni, even today. And the reason, and they're right, Me'ikar Adin HaGemara, we should be. Why don't we? There's a landmark tshuva from Rav Moshe Feinstein, who wrote many years ago that even though strictly speaking, certain people are allowed to be involved in the burial, but that's only people who are obligated, like the 7 relatives, etc. The problem being, and he was talking about America 30, 40, 50 years ago, it's still true today, that it's going to be, he felt it's going to cause more chilul yantiv than it will help, because there'll be many people who are going to go to driving to the cemetery, doing different things which they aren't allowed to, and he felt the whole thing's going to cause more of a takala than it is to help. Best not to have any burial on Yom Tov, which is the mainstream practice today, albeit there's nothing wrong. And it makes sense, because those small communities have more of a grip, in theory anyway, on the people. So among Hasidic communities, that you could control it more, or among specific small communities, you could control who's going to go to the burial, who's not. But as a general rule, it's very hard to keep, and therefore, and not only that, Yontif, maybe I'll do a burial on whatever the different reasons are, the bottom line is we don't do it. But in theory, you can have burial. Burial has nothing to do with Avelis. Even if you did the burial on Yontif, there's obviously no Avelis on Yontif. That doesn't kick it afterwards. And so therefore, and the reason why we don't have mourning on Yontif is because the biblical, or I should say the public mitzvah Simcha overrides the private mitzvah of mourning. The whole Jewish people are obligated in celebrating Yontif. Only the person who lost their loved ones are involved in the Avelis. The public mitzvah overrides the private mitzvah. A separate discussion we're not going to go into now, whether Simcha Bizman Hazeh is still biblical or not, and whether Avelis is, because it comes out, it's a machlokas, the Rambam and the Bali Tosis. The Rambam's opinion is even Bizman Hazeh, even today, Simcha is a biblical mitzvah. And Tosis' opinion is no, we have no Beis HaMikdash, there's no Karbanos. We have a mitzvah Simcha, but it's only rabbinical. And it's Lishitasim, because the Rambam's opinion is that Avelis Yom Rishon is biblical. The first day of a mourning is biblical. We, B'nai Ashkenaz, say the whole Avelis is only rabbinical. So however you learn the Gemara, it's the same result. According to the Rambam, the public biblical mitzvah Simcha overrides the private biblical mitzvah of Avelis. And according to B'nai Ashkenaz, the public rabbinical mitzvah beats out the private rabbinical mitzvah. When you have a public rabbinical in conflict with the private biblical, that's a separate discussion. But either way, it's clear the Gemara concludes there is no Avelis on Yontif. So they point out that in addition, so that's true on every Yontif. And in fact, we even assume there's a mitzvah Simcha on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as well. Albeit, as the Rambam points out, it's not a day of Yemei Simcha Yisera. It's not a day of open and elaborate Simcha, but we tone it down. But of course, we all have Sudas Yontiv. It's still a happy day, and in fact, that's the Gemara's discussion by Hallel. The Gemara talks about the different days of the year. One is obligated in saying Hallel. The Gemara actually says 18 days a year in Eretz Yisrael, 21 days in Chutz La'aretz. What are the 18 days a year we say a full Hallel?
Hanukkah takes up a chunk of it.
Hanukkah is 8.
Pesach?
How many?
2?
One. Chutz La'aretz 2.
Right.
We're in it right now. I'll give you a hint.
No, that's Sukkot. Every day.
Sukkot, right? 8 days of Sukkot. That's 16.
Rosh Chodesh?
And there's, there's one more.
Shavuot.
Correct. So 1 day Shavuos, 1 day Pesach, and 8 days Sukkot, 8 days Hanukkah gives us our 18. You add one more day for Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuos. For Chutz La'aretz, you get you 21. So the Gemara asks, what about Shabbos? Why don't we say, we know Shabbos is a happy day, why don't we say Hallel every day on every week? We should be saying Hallel. So the Gemara answers, gives a technical reason. It's not called a moed, even though that is a point of contention, but the Gemara says it here, so, because other places, if you look in the Chumash, it seems to include Shabbos among the Moadim, but the bottom line is the Gemara says Shabbos is not a moed, hence it's not a day of saying Hallel. So the Gemara asks, so what about Rosh Chodesh? Rosh Chodesh we say Chatzi Hallel, but that's only a custom. So why don't we say a full Hallel on Rosh Chodesh? Because Ikroi Moed by Rosh Chodesh, it is called the Moed. So the Gemara says because it's not Ikdish B'asiyas Malacha. It's not a day where you're prohibited to do work in. So the Gemara says, so then what's the difference then between Pesach and Sukkot? Why Pesach do we say only Hallel once or twice, first 2 days of the first day? And by Sukkot, we say Hallel the whole Yontif. What's the difference?
Sacrifice.
Yeah.
So the Gemara says because Sukkot, each day has its own carbon, as we'll notice in the Musaf Cholamayid, in the reading we read a different Kriya. But by Pesach, Ka Eileh, we read the same, we bring the same carbon every day, hence we don't say a full Hallel. So the Gemara gives 3 reasons. Either because it's called the Moed, you need all 3. It's called the Moed, it's an Isser Malacha, you can't do work on that day, and it has its own carbon.
So Hanukkah?
So we'll get to, so Gemara says, so what about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur then? If Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur has all 3, it's called the Moed, it's Ikdish B'asiyas Malacha, and it has its own carbon. So why don't we say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur?
It would be overkill.
So right, so therefore the Gemara says because it's not appropriate, because Efsha was standing there, life and death. Again, it's the most solemn day of the year, albeit it's a day of Simcha. We don't want to be be overconfident. There's a fine balance between, the balance between realizing it's Yom Hadin and still being a happy day. So to go openly be singing Hallel, people are being, might be judged for, it just isn't right, and therefore the Gemara says we don't say Hallel. But strictly speaking, we should say Hallel. What?
At meal time.
Right,
Sure.
or any time, right. And then just to Jeff's point, what about Hanukkah? Hanukkah clearly isn't called the Moed, it wasn't even around. It might have its own carbon, but there's no Issa Malacha, so you need all 3. So how come we say Hallel on Hanukkah? That'll be a whole separate share, but the simple answer the Gemara tells us is why?
Publicize the miracle.
Because it's a Yom She'ira B'Nes. It's a day which a miracle happened. So we see the 2 different...
And then you have Purim.
Right, why we don't, right. So the 2 different reasons why one could say a full Hallel. Either because you need the big 3, what has to be called a Moed, a holiday. It has to have its own carbon, and you can't do malacha. You need all 3 of those, or Yom She'ira B'Nes. So that's the difference between Pesach and Sukkot. Sukkot we say Hallel every day because it has its own carbon, and obviously the Gemara is assuming your own carbon based on its element of Simcha. And by Pesach we don't have its own carbons, we only say a Chatzi Hallel. And that's why they point out that by Sukkot we know we have Simchas Beis HaShoeva, we have Simchas Torah, even though it's the next yanta, but it's all part of it. So Sukkot has a unique role in sense, not only is it part of the Shalosh Regolim, but it's also an extension of the Yomim Noram. It's also an extension of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. We're still saying LaDavid Hashem Ori, the things we take over. And as the Rama, as we know, the Torah says, what's Simcha? It's Lefnei Hashem Elokechem, as Rav Selevan always points out, to explain the Rambam's opinion. The Rambam who says Simcha, even today, without a Beis HaMikdash, it's still Minat Torah, it's still biblical, because it's not limited to Basa V'Yayin, it's not limited to having meat of the Karbanos, but it's just being in the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This pointing out, Halacha L'maisa, we paskin today minimally, I'm encouraging meat, but it's not mandatory, Ein Simcha Elo Yayin. It's minimally speaking, every meal during Chol Hamoed Sukkot, and that, for that matter, for certainly Yontif, or you're making Kiddush, but any meal you have during Chol Hamoed Sukkot, Chol Hamoed Pesach, one has a mitzvah to have Yayin, because we assume minimally speaking, Ein Simcha Elo Yayin, so one should have wine during the Suda, part of the mitzvah Minat Torah, mitzvah Midrabanan of Simcha. So it's an extension of the Yom Noram, and because the Rambam writes, what's Simcha? Is the closer you are to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And what separates us from God? Sin. The more sin we do, the more mistakes we make, the bigger the barrier. So we all came after Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we got a clean slate. So the ultimate Simcha is being close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're the closest now. Right after Yom Kippur, we go into Sukkot, and therefore we have the high element of Simcha. In fact, that's why they point out that normally, as I said, Simcha is associated with Yayin, Basar v'Yayin. But on Sukkot, we have Simcha's Beis HaShoeva. We have the water libations. Normally we have the Nisach HaYayin, the wine libations, but on Sukkot we have the water libations. Why is it now that usually we need wine to get us going? But how come on Sukkot it's enough just to have the Nisach HaYayin? That's what the Mefarshim point out is an extension of the Yavim Noraim, that as we see it all the time, unfortunately, people have survived, a natural disaster or an unnatural one, an earthquake, a hurricane, a fire burns down the home. They're left with absolutely nothing. They have all possessions. They don't have even life insurance, or they're not covered. And they get on, they say, we're so happy just to be alive. They're there with their family, the wife, the children. I'm so happy to be alive. So that's the concept here, that everyone through a life and death situation, mi yechya umi yamas, as we say in the Sanatokef. So we all have gone through, and now, so once you do that, all you need is even water. The things you have in common with an animal, things you have in common with everything, you start to appreciate the little things in life. That's the ultimate simcha, because you can't be, if you live in the world of entitlement where you think every person deserves X, Y, and Z, that person's never going to be happy. But going back to the basics, to be happy is you have to start to appreciate things, and that's why. And in fact, that's the whole essence of being a Jew. In fact, Yehuda, it's the acknowledgement. Everything's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's why we're going to be davening shortly. So we all know we have a silent Shmoneh Esrei, but in the Chazaras Hashatz, the Chazan does it. But there's one part of the Chazaras Hashatz where we don't let the Chazan do. We're also involved. What's that?
Kedusha.
Well, no one does that, but what's something that we do? Modim anachnuach. When it comes to acknowledging everything, thank God, thank you for everything. We all owe it to you. That we have ein shliach. You can't send a messenger to do the thanks for you. That you yourself are involved, and that's the whole essence of Sukkot. Actually, it says Yaakov was the first one. He built Sukkot, is what it says in the Bereshis. So, because Yaakov has the midah of hakaras hatov, that up until he realized he made his parnasa to the animals. Up until now, they left the animals outside in the rain, snow, whatever, and that was it. Yaakov, who made his livelihood off the animals, realized, I can't do that. I need them. I owe them so much thanks. He went ahead and he built sukkahs to protect them. And in fact, that's why they explain. The pasuk says that when Yosef was tempted by the wife of Potiphar, she tried to seduce him. So the pasuk says, and you read it with the Shalshelet by Yemain, how could I do that? He owes so much. He did so much. He got me out of jail. He saved my life, basically. I'm going to go ahead now and be seduced by, the pasuk said he couldn't do it. It just wasn't right. But the Medrash gives us another picture. The Medrash says, he was, as he was being seduced, the Mus Yukno Shel Aviv, the image of his father came down, and he saw Yaakov, and he stopped. Which one is it? It's because he felt he owed the Potiphar so much, or because Yaakov came down? The answer is it's the same thing, because Yaakov is the midah of hakaras hatov. That's what the pasuk's telling me. And that's the basics. That's Sukkot. Yaakov was the first one to institute it, and now it's Sukkot. That's not just saying thank you, but having the appreciation that everything's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what Simcha, especially on Sukkot, as an extension of the Yom Noram. Nisach Hamayim, we only need water to get us going. When you go back to the basics, they realize everything's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that leads the person to Simcha.